Tel Aviv. The rift in Israeli society shows on the streets. People are demonstrating for the release of the hostages. Among them, a handful of protesters call for a ceasefire and an end to Israeli occupation. And on the opposite side, supporters of Benjamin Netanyahu.
I oppose them because they are stuck in this mindset that peace is the only solution. They are trying to have peace with murderers, with rapists, with people that mutilate bodies. They are so addicted to this concept of peace that they are unwilling to wake up from it.
It's very hard for many Israelis to think towards peace right now, to think about ending the war. I think that also our government is increasing the fears and the hatred, as well as abandoning the citizens of Israel.
4 months since the start of the war, the country no longer stands united as anger and frustration mount toward the government. Some support the ground operations, and others want to negotiate the release of hostages. Since the start of the war, 223 Israeli soldiers have died in Gaza, and widespread bombardments have killed over 27,000 Palestinians. But despite its efforts, the Israeli army has not freed a single hostage. Instead, 116 captives were returned thanks to a prisoner exchange last November. In the small, ultra-Orthodox town of Bnei Brak, one man refuses the idea of an exchange. Zvika Moor's son, Eitan, was taken hostage on October 7th. He says he's ready to sacrifice his son's life for the security of his country.
We say that the right way to bring back the hostages is to put significant pressure on Hamas. The state of Israel and Israeli citizens have already paid a heavy price on October 7th and more generally over the last 100 years. There must be no deal like that of soldier Gilad Shalit in 2012. Because after 1,027 terrorists were released in the Shalit deal, 1,400 citizens were killed here. 1,400 Jews were killed. So if they're released now, which is about 7,000 terrorists, what could happen?
Since October 7th, Zvika has received hundreds of messages of support.
I agree with everything he says about prioritizing general interests over personal ones. I can't imagine speaking as forcefully as he does when his son is a hostage. Yet he's capable of saying that the general interest takes precedence over personal interests.
Zvika has set up an association to get his voice heard. Forum Tikva, which means hope in Hebrew, represents 29 families of hostages. He supports far-right politicians such as Itamar Ben-Gvir and believes many Israelis share the same views.
כבר ער לחדשות שיש עוד חסימה באזור כרם שלום של משפחות שחוסמות את ההומניטריה. שזה, שמדברים על לחץ על החמאס, אתה יודע, יש לחץ צבאי. צריך לחשוב איך מובילים אזרחים, לעשות לחץ אזרחי שלנו.
We want this to be our last war against Hamas. We don't want another one in 2 or 3 years.
כשאני שומע את צביקה זה מרגש, כאילו באמת.
It touches me every time I hear him talking about this. It gives me goosebumps that a father can even say this. But you have to understand that while it might sound altruistic, it's not. It's rather selfish. He's thinking of his grandchildren, and he understands that freeing his son, whatever the cost, will endanger his grandchildren, who won't be able to live in Israel.
Yet most of the families of the hostages want the same thing. It's now that they want talks to free their loved ones. In Jerusalem, Gaza Street is stained with fake blood. Anti-Netanyahu activists want to show the suffering of their relatives on the very street where the Prime Minister lives.
There needs to be a pause, whether it's in talks in Egypt with all the heads of the organizations, where they can talk face to face and not write a message on a letter, send it, it takes 2 days, and then they talk about it 2 days, and then it takes another 2 days, and then a week passes, and another piece of my uncle stays in Gaza. This needs to be resolved now, and they need to work on it hard.
מדינת ישראל היא לא הפקר. מדינת ישראל צריכה לשמור על האזרחים שלה.
The question remains, can Netanyahu weather the anger sweeping the nation until the end of the Gaza offensive? Or will Israeli society slowly tear itself apart as the war continues with no end in sight?